Bhagavad Gita, Chapter 8, Attaining the Supreme. It is a sign of sanity and wisdom if one takes time to contemplate their death. During special festivals, Latin Americans hang skulls in their houses to remind themselves. Yogis in India meditate on the banks of the Ganges where open pyre funerals are being conducted. Although many would consider it morbid to contemplate death, it is nevertheless a real situation that nobody wants to experience, but that everyone has to face. The Bhagavad Gita outlines 4 such unavoidable predicaments: birth, disease, old age, and ultimately death. We often forget the inevitability of death, and thus, in Chapter 8, entitled Attaining the Supreme, Krishna deals with this very subject. The acronym is DEAD, D for doubts, E for end of life, A for attaining the supreme, D for devotion. D for doubts, verses 1 to 4. Doubting is a function of intelligence, and at no point in the Bhagavad Gita does Krishna reprimand Arjuna for asking so many questions. On the contrary, he encourages Arjuna to intelligently contemplate all his answers and subsequently make his own decisions. This chapter opens with Arjuna's doubts and questions on several spiritual concepts. Krishna concisely answers 7 of Arjuna's 8 questions immediately and then prepares to answer the final question. How can one attain a spiritual destination at the time of death? The rest of the chapter is solely dedicated to answer this essential inquiry. E for end of life, verses 5 to 8. Imagine you're going to watch a movie and you meet someone who just saw it. You'll never guess what happens, they say. Before they even finish that statement, you'll interject and stop them. After all, knowing the end spoils the whole film. Similarly, for those engaged in worldly pursuits, hearing about, contemplating, and accepting the end, death, is not the most inspiring reflection. It simply spoils their movie of life in the here and now. For a spiritualist, however, the end is not a depressing thought, since his concept of life and its purpose is much broader. For one who is born, death is certain, and for one who dies, birth is around the corner. Krishna explains how a person's thoughts at death sum up their consciousness and aspirations cultivated throughout life. Thus, one's state of mind at the time of death determines their next situation. For those who remember God at death, they reach the kingdom of God. A for attaining the supreme, verses 9 to 22. The entire world is a temporary university specifically created to dispense life lessons. When one becomes frustrated by the pursuits of this world, they realize that happiness lies in another realm. As spiritual beings, life in a complex world of matter is an incompatible situation. While the material world is rubber-stamped as a constantly changing place of misery, the spiritual world is distinguished as being eternal and all blissful. There are many painstaking ways in which different spiritualists conduct their lives in order to attain that supreme destination, and having attained it, one never returns to this temporary realm again. D for devotion, verses 23 to 28. Since various spiritual practices are discussed in this chapter, Krishna concludes by outlining the most effective process to attain the supreme. Bhakti Yoga, the path of active service to God, in a mode of devotion, is described as the topmost spiritual path. In an age of rampant materialism and temptation, coupled with individual weakness and lack of spiritual aspiration, a highly practical and powerful spiritual process is required. Through Bhakti Yoga, anyone can experience an incredibly fulfilling spiritual connection in a very short time. If one is thus able to saturate their consciousness in God, they will be sure to attain the supreme destination regardless of all technicalities and intricacies that other spiritual processes may stress.